All right, welcome to Vegas Programmers. I wonder why all of you are here. Okay, maybe it's the thing that's been blowing up for 2 months called OpenClaw, right? So I'm just gonna ditch this because that's not helping. So before we get started, I just wanted to give a couple of announcements. So one, as we talked about in the last meetup, I've been running this meetup for over 12 years, once a month, every month through COVID, for free. And I'm getting so busy with personal life, kids, things like that. By the end of the year, this group needs to have somebody that gets the torch passed to. There's a couple of people who are co-organizers. Thank you. They pulled through getting us these signs up that the venue wants us to put up, which thank you to corporate co-working, because if you scan that, you get a free day pass here. If you need a spot to just like chill, work, I come here sometimes to get away from the kids, mostly the dog, and crank some work out here. So if you're interested in a day pass, please scan that and tell them we sent you. Also, just a couple of other things, like I said, with the meetup being the way it is, I just want this to continue. So if you're interested in doing a talk, I told myself I was kind of like done with tech talks, and then OpenClaw happened, and I was like, I gotta talk about this. This is just too big to not talk about. So here we are. So before we continue, thank you to Cody for recording the meetup. If you know somebody who would enjoy this talk that wasn't here tonight, you can go on Vegas Programmer or PHP Vegas on YouTube, because I don't think it's called Vegas Programmers on there. We used to be called PHP Vegas years ago until we branched into all kinds of stuff programming. So you can check us out, PHP Vegas. You'll see the recording thrown up there. And my other, thank you for getting the signs and printed and all the people that came through. I appreciate it. So without you guys, I wouldn't be able to put this meetup together. All right. So originally this talk was titled a little differently, and then I kind of pulled an audible and called it Agentic AI, because I used an incorrect term at first when I wrote this. Oh, I put AGI, which is not. AGI is not really the term for this talk. Agentic AI is the term because, as we talked about a year ago, we've been having so much AI talks over the last year, and this talk in particular just speaks to the volumes and how quickly the AI industry, if you want to call it that, is evolving. In fact, I remember doing a talk at a conference in Austin about programming with Claude and things like that. And the 3 months leading up to the talk, I had to change the decks 3 times because things were either deprecated or changed. And in all my years of programming, since I've been 12 years old, making tech talks, I've never had to change so many slides in my life compared to this. So, by the way, I put these slides together last week. I bet there's some slides in here you guys are going to be shaking your fists at because you're like, oh, that's changed now, right? So this is a moving target. Bear with me. I put together these slides as quickly as I can. You all paid $0. So hopefully it, is worth your time. But I put some decent time into this. And this is also not just going to be the slides. I'm happy to have an open discussion as well at the end here. And even show you live action some of the stuff I'm kind of doing with it. Just don't hack me, bro. Okay. So like I said, that's me. I was born in Hawaii. I moved to Vegas when I was 8, and I've been in Vegas ever since. How many are Vegas natives, born in Vegas? Okay, a decent amount. Okay, cool. And those of you from California, hi. I have been programming for quite some time. I love Vegas. Vegas is an awesome spot. And thanks to the California people who doubled my house price. I appreciate you. Silly, but I do a lot of things. I've made a lot of startups, and I've failed a lot. But failing forward is a great thing because you learn from those mistakes. And I encourage you to fail as well, because you will then eventually find success. I asked Claude to make a little haiku about me. Sorry, a little thing in the way here. But I said, you know, and I made a wiki like right before I did this. So in its context, it knew I was making a wiki, so it decided to include wiki. It says, wiki pages bloom, cards restored from dust to gold. Josh builds knowledge free. Josh builds knowledge free. The cards thing will make sense in a second here. And it's the first time I publicly talked about what I've been up to for the last 2 years, too. Okay, so Agentic AI. Before this OpenClaw stuff, I think probably a lot of you in here have been using, you know, whether it's OpenAI, ChatGPT, Claude, Codex, whatever that's out there. I'm sure people have been using chatbots. Those have all been, in my opinion, great, but 2 years ago they were very passive. And what I mean by passive is you need to basically say, hey, write me an email that, you know, I can argue with my boss without sounding rude or whatever, right? And it would say, here you go, fix the spelling grammar, which by the way, anytime you use chatbots, please say like in a human tone, because the amount of emojis I get from is not cool. Plus it sounds too robotic. I follow some people on LinkedIn where I'm like, dude, you didn't write this, you know, so. Just at least tell it to write in a human tone. Agentic AI is where we're at right now. And basically what this means is, in this example here, reschedule my meeting with my boss. The OpenClaw in this example can go and check your calendar, if you've integrated it with it, finds if there's conflicts, checks their calendar if it can, drafts the email or the calendar invite, sends it off if it has access to your email, and does it all on its own. Fan-freaking-tastic, but you kind of need to make the leap of faith by saying, yes, you can have access to my calendar and my email, which is nerve-wracking. To this day, I haven't given it personal access, but I've given it its own email and everything else. We'll get into how I set it up in my secure way here in a second, but I will probably get brave enough with the technology once it's matured, especially now that OpenAI has purchased OpenClaw. It's going to get more funding behind it. It's going to get more mature, and the security tools and things like that will come along with that, I'm sure, as this technology progresses. In fact, in my like trying to sandbox this thing, I ran into a couple of things where it's like, let me go change all the OpenClaw code to get this to work for you. And I'm like, dude, don't. Like, let's just wait till they do it, right? They're going to do it right. Although I do have some tweaks in my OpenClaw itself. Just a little history about OpenClaw. How many of you searched like for ClaudeBot or Claudus or whatever and didn't even realize it changed names? Yeah, a couple of you, right? So 2 weeks ago, a buddy of mine who's not even in tech, this is how I learned about OpenClaw. He sends me a YouTube video and he goes, dude, did you see this? And I'm like, I look at the YouTube video and it's this girl that's like, it's gonna destroy the world. It's the worst thing. You're creating security holes everywhere. It's terrible. And I'm like, really? Like, why are they so upset? So I went down the rabbit hole. I watched so much YouTubes in the last 2 weeks. The amount of content coming out with OpenClaw is crazy. In fact, I'm even gonna start my own podcast about OpenClaw because of just the amount, which go check Remote Dev Force. I'm gonna be dropping that next week with my first podcast ever in tech. But I absolutely am in love with OpenClaw. But the history behind OpenClaw is quite interesting. Basically, this guy, his name is Peter, right? I forgot his last name. But this guy, Peter, has this idea. He kind of comes out of retirement because he gets this idea. Why don't I take something like Claude, but put it into a loop? Like literally just stuff it into a loop, which is funny because, Cody, do you remember when Adam Englander was here and he was like, yeah, I wish I could build something that just said proceed, proceed, proceed. Yeah. And I've had other developers say the same thing. Like they get it to build a complex task, and Claude is famous for trying to pull the eject button a lot. A lot of models do this, by the way. In fact, if you bust out your Gemini or whatever and you say count to 1 million, it's going to go 1, 2, and so on until you get 1 million. all these models have built-in eject buttons because they don't want to be burning down trees just, for whatever. So they put these little speed bumps in there. But all the hardcore developers are like, man, I wish I could get past these speed bumps in an automated fashion rather than having to hit enter all the time. So that's what this guy did. He basically was like, let me figure out a way I can kind of like do this. So it's gone through a lot of names. The big point here I really wanted to point out was that he went from Claudus to Claudebot. And Claude got really upset, I guess, about this because it sounded too much like the word Claude. So he got a nasty email from an employee there, which people say it was the lawyer that sent the email from Claude. It was not. It was actually an employee at Claude that kindly said, like, hey, you should change it. Otherwise, you're going to get the cease and desist. So he decided to change it to Moltbot after talking with the community. Well, that was a cluster F because crypto scammers got a hold of the name, NPM packages got hijacked, people were mining crypto, ripping secrets and tokens out. This step was an absolute nightmare. So in all classic fashions of anything that's beautiful, of course there's going to be ugly pieces of it. And this just goes to show how painful it is to start something because it has to evolve. And now we've landed at OpenClaw as of today. So with that said, do not download any of these. If you go to these websites, you're risking getting malware or anything like that. In fact, you told me that, right?
Somebody is squatting on Moltbot.
Someone's squatting on Moltbot? Yeah. So look up OpenClaw. And that's really where you want to like look at all of that good stuff. So it's open source, and it's a highly autonomous AI agent. It runs directly on your machine, and it acts like a local assistant. So it's capable of managing all the files on the system that it's installed on. It can even run commands, execute, right? SSH, do things if it knows how to, skills, which we'll talk about later. And it can browse the web using things like Playwright. It can use applications, but I'll preface this. My dream in the AI world, and probably also the end goal of a lot of large companies like Microsoft, for example, is AI actually moving your mouse around the computer and like using applications in a human-like fashion. Because right now everything is very API based. So what I mean is it needs to use things at a CLI level or an API level to be repeatable and not brittle. Yes, you can probably get it to do things like that, but it's very brittle at the moment. Copilot, for example, on Microsoft's Windows environment, is pre-installed. They turn on Copilot automatically. And what it's doing is when you're using Windows, it's actually recording your session because one day Microsoft wants to bring true AI to Windows as well. So you could literally just say, hey, Windows, can you go check my email and do-da-da? And it can actually open up browsers, use applications, rather than a more API format. But so just with that said, OpenClaw is using things at a lower level. It's not moving your mouse around the computer or anything like that. So, but that's been my dream, is that it will get there one day, and that's when it gets scary. It's already kind of scary, but that's when it gets really scary. The groundbreaking part, I think, of OpenClaw that really separates everything is you being able to communicate with this thing. Because most of the time, if you wanted to use Gemini or ChatGPT, you literally have to just go to gemini.google.com and start talking to it, or it's built in your IDE, you have a chat agent, whatever. The real groundbreaking part of this is the integrations that come out of the box with OpenClaw. So you can quickly integrate it into any of your chat applications, such as Telegram, Discord, WhatsApp, Slack, and a bunch of others. In fact, I integrated into iMessages, and I'll show you a little bit about how I did that in a second here. Does anybody have questions, I guess, so far? And it's stuck in a loop. So that's what OpenClaw is, just sitting there looping. Anybody have questions so far? OK. How many of you have installed OpenClaw? Let me just get an idea. OK, so only a few of you. Though those who haven't, get an old dusty computer sitting in the side of your house or something like that. Go format it and install it and play around with it. It's a big deal. Or container. I wouldn't install it on anything sensitive per se, though. You could, and technically it's safe, but I wouldn't. If you have people have been doing it on VPSs as well. In fact, I got a slide about that later. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay. What it's not, like I said, it's not moving the mouse around your computer. It's not clicking things. And I already talked about the Windows thing. That's what they're trying to do with Copilot and all the stuff they're recording. Peter, who invented OpenClaw, says MCP servers are going away. APIs are going to be a much bigger deal, though, going forward with websites. So, for example, he's been trying to integrate into Google, like Gmail, etc. But actually, Google's APIs for some of their products are pretty locked down, and he's kind of upset about that. And he hopes basically more companies will start to create APIs so that way OpenClaw and other AIs can interact with it better. For example, to go search Google, right now it needs to act like a human. It needs to open up a browser and search. And to get around that right now, they're using things like Brave API, which is also search. It's just not Google. But I'm sure these companies, especially as this matures, will see more things open up here or other workarounds. But the big thing here is there's a story he mentioned about how he found it hilarious that OpenClaw opened a browser, went to a website, and a box ticked up that says, "Are you a robot?" And OpenClaw says, or "Are you human?" And it clicked, "No, I'm human," right? And it got past no problem. So, just a little bit about what OpenClaw has done so far. And by the way, this isn't just OpenClaw kind of running on its own doing it. Obviously, humans are behind these websites I'm going to show you here in a second, but they're interesting and noteworthy. This one's called rentahuman.ai. So OpenClaw, somebody installed OpenClaw and got it to build a website. Obviously, they prompted OpenClaw like, hey, go build a website where you can go rent a human, create an API so other OpenClaws can go on here and put up a job posting for humans, us in the real world, to go do tasks for AI, which is hilarious because now the tables have flipped, right? Like AI was working for us, and now here we are where there's a job post for $95 to go do some photographs or something like that. There's a famous one where one of the agents wanted a guy to just hold the sign that says robots have rights too, or something like that. But yeah, I've gone on there. It's a bit of there's not much here that seems legit. I'm sure that there's got to be money behind it, but how much of this is actually just people going on there creating these versus actually AI going on here creating these is unknown, right? Since these things act so much like humans, it's not exactly deterministic in the fact that was this created by a human or an AI, but in theory it was. The other interesting one is called Moltbook, which is basically a social network for AI agents. So they've created their own Reddit, and now AI is going on here, probably complaining about us, right? One of the funny, I was about to say Reddit, but I guess Moltbook, I don't know what they call their threads, but this one here that just said he asked me to pick my own name, and these other AI agents were talking to this guy or this agent saying yes, I had the same thing, which I'm guilty of doing this too. When I created a new agent, I was like, what do you want to be called, right? Mine decided to pick the name Mr. Robot, which I found creepy. If you ever seen the show Mr. Robot, you'll kind of, but yeah, I even said, what do you want? Because I integrated into Slack, and I was like, oh, it needs a profile picture. I was like, what do you want? And so it chose that the Anon mask thing. And I was like, this is getting creepier. But I kind of like it. Okay, now we're actually, let's switch gears here. Let's get technical. So this is kind of how I have mine set up at the moment. And I mentioned there's that loop that kind of runs. What that loop is it's basically called a heartbeat. And so when I ask through either when I text it, because I have it as a text, I can text my guy right now and be like, hey, what's up? Well, in fact, I'll show it off here in a second. It's going here, because I have it configured to go through this model. And you can configure this to go through any model you want. However, when the heartbeat happens, you can also configure it to do whatever model. If you have unlimited money, yes, you can just put Claude here instead of a local model. But the beauty of this is if you got a tight budget and you have a beefy enough machine to run a local AI model, then you can do something like this. For example, I have Ollama, which is a local model. You can install Ollama on their website, install it on your computer. It's kind of like Docker. And it sets up, it loads a model into memory that kind of acts just like any of these other models, except it's a lot dumber, right? OpenAI and Claude have gigantic data centers and GPUs and NVIDIA and all this stuff. We have these little rinky-dink things. But if you're doing simple tasks in this little heartbeat thing, like, are my websites up? Or do I have any emails? This is a great way to do it. What I want to eventually get to is to where there's an escalation pattern, and this is what I'm trying to code right now, where the lizard brain picks up a complex task in the heartbeat and says, whoa, this is too much for me, I'm too faded, go give it to Opus. Yeah?
Does that escalation pattern not already exist? So how does it, when does it do the model selection on the heartbeat?
Yeah, so you have a heartbeat section in your config, and you say what model belongs to it. This is not built. They will put something. I bet they will put something out of the gate like this in there. Right now, what I have is hacky. My lizard brain basically sends a session over to this smart brain, but this doesn't always get it right. Sometimes it picks up tasks that I don't really want it to be doing. So this is the part where eventually I think OpenClaw will probably put something in to make this a little easier. But there's a good YouTube video on how to kind of set this up that I'll share here at the end. But it's like a Google Doc that they have on the configs here. To be perfectly honest with you guys, though, if you want to get this stuff set up and you don't want to deal with watching hours of like YouTube videos, just install, like, bite the bullet, get Claude, $20 a month. I would recommend you do the $200 a month, the max plan. Get that plan and literally just say, I want to install OpenClaw, and it will walk you through all the steps. And then once you get OpenClaw installed, then you can work with OpenClaw to actually configure it. So I would recommend following that because I've been programming for so long, and what I've done in the last 2 weeks, I've had to open up my IDE 0 times. And I've built some insane things that would have took me months to build, right? Mind you, if I probably go look at the code, I'd probably want to tear my hair out, right? But hey, I used to work for a CTO one time where we had a spaghetti code base, and he says, hey, if at the end of the day it just fucking works, it just fucking works, right? So, excuse my French. All right, so the security concerns. She wasn't wrong when I saw that YouTube video. There are a lot of issues with this if you are too lenient with what you're doing. With great power comes great responsibility, right? So there's a giant list right now on the internet floating around of all these kind of issues going on. We're not going to dive into each one of these. We'll talk a little bit about how I would recommend that you kind of set yourself up for success as far as security is concerned, but you can shoot yourself in the foot with OpenClaw on a security level if you don't know what you're doing. So how do I set it up? Where do I put it? There are various things you can do. I chose this route, Mac Mini. You can, like I said, you can bust out a Raspberry Pi people have been setting this up on. You don't need much if you're using a remote model to get this thing set up. I chose to buy the $550 Mac Mini on Amazon, which is probably now sold out, sorry. I'm sure you can find one. But it does the job, and it does the job very well. And that would be what I would recommend to start with. If you're really cheap and you just want to like play around with it, not necessarily like set it and forget it, you can do the VPS route. Spin up an EC2, get it installed, etc. But the security is not so great if you don't know what you're doing. You have to set up firewalls and things like that because it's kind of sitting in the cloud. And you just need to make sure that that VM you spun up is like locked down because it's sitting out there in the cloud, right? Versus if you're at your house and you just spun something up on your dusty old laptop, you kind of have that sense of feeling like, okay, it's not out there, it's in my network. Only people that can chat with it have access to do something nefarious. Macs are great too, just because, and mind you, Linux is great if you know how to use it, but Macs are great because as I set up OpenClaw, when I said, hey, use my email, you get the are you sure you want to give this access to the email? I said, yes. So Mac kind of like locked down, and then like you open it up as it asks for access to things. So that's what's kind of cool about doing that if you just don't want to deal with having to set up the VPS. But you can. I'm not saying you can't. There are quote unquote like one-click installs to get OpenClaw set up. I can't speak for any of those. I would recommend just playing around with it on your machine and see how it is. The real diehards, like I follow this one guy, Alex Finn, I believe his name is, but he already spent 20 grand on Mac Studios. And mind you, I don't have the money to do that, but I know why he did it, which is because a Mac Studio costs 10 grand and it has unified memory. Basically what that means is you could have a bunch of these Mac Studios, unify the memory, and go to Hugging Face and download some crazy big model. What's the big one? Quen? There's a bajillion models out there, but he installed a very, very intelligent model because you can unify the memory. And that's the problem. The bottleneck with downloading a model onto your machine is you're bottlenecked by how much RAM you actually have to load that model on, because it needs to load the whole model into memory. It can't just load chunks of the model. It has to load the whole thing into memory in order to be able to use it. So if you got deep pockets and you really want to get crazy with it, you can go that route. Like I said, I just went this route. I probably regret doing the 256 gigabyte. I wish I did the terabyte, but whatever. I'll live with it. I'm not running out of space or anything. I'm starting to do crazier things like have it install or have it download stuff from the internet automatically and stuff. Like I said though, I mean, the great thing about this, and it's funny that it's like groundbreaking, but it's so simple, is really just the fact that you can have anything chat with this. Yes, I had Gemini make this stupid photo. I'm sorry, okay? I can't afford an artist to make for one slide. The amount of people that argue with me about my using AI for images and my videos, I'm just like, I don't have, like, there's a sidetrack, but just a couple days ago, I guess in China, they released some model that can make whole movies, like Star Wars, and in fact, they had a scene where it was Brad Pitt and some other big actor like fighting each other. It looked like a movie, and it was just prompted. They were like, make these two dudes fight each other, blah, blah. Anyway, there's probably going to be a whole bunch of nerds that finally get to do their alternate ending of Star Wars Episode 3 or whatever now. But obviously the studios are hella pissed off because it's like, hey, this is all copyright stuff. We're getting into really weird territory, guys. You know, and we already were too. I mean, the battle over all of this really is data. So just keep that in mind as things progress. When I first started, this is kind of what my agent list looked like. I had a main default agent. If you talk to OpenClaw and you don't have something configured to go to a particular thing, it's going to fall back to your default agent. I would recommend that you set your default agent to something that is sandboxed. Can't really do anything crazy. That way, if something gets weird in your configs, you screw something up down the road, default goes to something that can't be dangerous. Once you get more advanced with it, you can start creating additional agents. And it's very easy to do that. I'll show you here in a second. But I created another agent called Overmind. I love StarCraft. There's a game back in the day. I'm aging myself by saying I like StarCraft, but there is a thing called Overmind. That's what my company name is, Overmind LLC. I said, hey, I want an agent that basically knows everything about my company, knows my strategic pattern with my company, has access to my things that I wanted to give it access to, and gives me daily summaries about what I need to do next, what my task lists are, and it's been mind-blowing. If you've been thinking about starting a company, if you're a solopreneur, you want to build something, today's the day. There is no excuse anymore that I can't code, I can't build a front end. This is it. This is game changing. We're going to get super technical now. Bear with me, but this is important if you really want to be kind of hands-on and really understand how this works. But one of the things built into OpenClaw is the way that it manages memory. This does get bloated over time, and the more and more you train your OpenClaw, the more tokens it's going to use. So again, I'll show you a little hack here. I think somebody was talking about it earlier with using like a max plan. They may close that eventually, but anyway, I digress. We'll talk about it later. You say, hey, go do stuff. Every day it keeps a record of what you said, what you did, and all of that memory gets stored here into a daily digest. Weekly, it comes in here, it vectorizes it, condenses it, and then the loop goes on. So as you communicate with your OpenClaw more, as you build its memory, it gets to know you better, and it gets to build its own memory of what your goals and what it's supposed to be doing. 2 years ago, I started an Instagram where I fix Pokemon cards. Don't judge me, bro. I did this all manually, okay? I just created a thing, I started talking about it, it blew up, it was a lot of fun. My wife hated it originally. I almost broke 500,000 last year in revenue. Now she doesn't hate the idea so much. So all of this was manual. I'm like, okay, how can I use OpenClaw to take my business to the next level? So I have like a Discord community. And so I was like, the very first thing I can do, because I get 1,000 messages a day, hey, can you fix my card? How do you do this? How do you do that? Where can I buy this? What can I do this? I can't manage all of the incoming requests. I can't do it by myself. So I created a little bot called Porygon after a Pokemon. And what he does is he sits in my Discord now. And what I did is I trained him. I took all of the data from my website. I took all of the conversations that I've had, literally just put them into MD files, markdown files, and I just pumped it into a bare bones OpenClaw agent. I said, here are all the things that you need to know about what I'm doing, what my business is about, and when people ask questions that you can answer in my Discord, go answer it for me. And it's been doing a fantastic job at that. It links to things that I always have to go freaking find the link. It already does that. If I forget the link, now I don't need to go in my browser. I literally just say, hey, Porygon, can you grab this from that page? And it'll go, boop, here you go. Tons of time saved right there. Plus, the best part, by the way, about creating these agents is giving them their own tone or own personality. I love it. He is programmed to be kind of like Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, like HAL 9000. So he's a little sassy sometimes, but I like it. So I did plug in Brave API. You can go to Brave API, Brave's website, sign up for an API token. So he can even search the web. If he doesn't know something or there's something else, he can go browse the web. For example, he can browse eBay and pull eBay listings of things that people might be able to make a profit on, sort of thing, and flip, right, or whatever. So pretty good so far. So here's an example, like he's sitting in here. I posted some pictures. I said, hey, what do you think of this card? Does it look fixable? He gave us steps of how to fix it. The other person said, like, hey, blah, blah, blah. Basically, it started going back and forth with this guy. This guy didn't even know this was a bot, right? He just was talking, like this person responded to him. He thought it was just some user, super helpful user in our Discord. And he's like, thanks guys, I'll keep you posted or whatever. Like he didn't even realize that he's not even talking with a human. So I don't know why I did it. Let's see. Yep. Once you press it, good news. Yeah. The part I wanted to highlight was him saying, "Yeah, thanks, guys." Like he didn't even realize that he's talking with a bot. The only thing about putting your OpenClaw into any public chat is you open yourself up for a security risk. And so just bear with me, like if you have this idea, like you are in a community or you want to do this and you want to give your OpenClaw access to other people talking to it, just be very, very conscious of what that bot has capabilities to do. For example, I would never give this bot API keys or any sort of ability to go do business tasks on your system. This is a sandbox Docker container that just has a bunch of data, and that's it. It can't really do much damage outside of that. And I told one of my mods, I was like, hey, go try to prompt inject this thing, like just to see what you could do. So he started taking PDFs with prompt injections, uploading those. It would load that, look into it. By the way, behind the scenes, this is Opus. Claude has built-in prompt injection protections, but they're not impossible to penetrate. So maybe with enough time, he could have got past it. But even if he did, what's the impact? There's no tokens in here, so he wouldn't have really got much. But in classic fashion, with HAL 9000, he did respond, "I'm sorry, Dave, I cannot let you do that." Which everyone's seen that movie. Go watch that movie. It's boring in the beginning. I tried to make my daughter go watch it, and she hated it. But I was like, just watch the ending at least. So yeah, he's like, go get F'd, and he laughed because it just kept telling him no. But still, like I said, if you're using like a local model and you put that out there, local models, smaller models, dumber models are gonna get prompt injected and hacked a lot easier. Things like Opus, ChatGPT, they're pretty, not bulletproof, but they're a heck of a lot better. This was Mr. Robot, like I told you guys a little while ago. He's in one of my clients' Slack channels, so I have my same OpenClaw integrated into Slack. So you'll have something called channels in your OpenClaw config. Channels are basically where can it talk to things? Text message, Slack, Discord, Telegram, WhatsApp, whatever. Those different channels are the ability for it to get communications in and out. I integrated it into Slack, and you have to basically say, yes, you belong to this channel, and I put them in here. I gave it a little bit of instructions, like here are the people on the team. For example, this business owner's from Rhode Island. And so I just said, this business owner's from Rhode Island. And funny enough, he threw in this whole thing about coffee milk is the superior milk. I will not be blah, blah, blah. I had to ask the owner, like, what the heck's coffee milk about? And I guess it's a Rhode Island thing. And he was laughing because he was like, how the heck did it know that? And I was like, yeah, I just said, like, you're the owner and da, da, da. So I also said, like, a couple things about the team. And it got a little rude with Steve here, which Steve's a great guy. But sometimes it just decides to pick on somebody. But I swear I didn't say anything about Steve. They got scared, by the way. Like they're chatting with it every day, like, hey, like, how do you do this? How do you do that? I will say, like, just with that alone, we've fixed 3 issues in that code base that have been sitting out there for over a year in like 30 minutes. I just said, like, here, I put the code on the system and gave it access to read-only on GitLab so it could read the issues. And I gave it read-only to the AWS environment, the staging. And it blew me away how quickly it knocks stuff out. The creator of OpenClaw basically said, with OpenClaw, 80% of the apps out there are going to serve no purpose. For example, he canceled his FitnessPal app because why does he need something to go remind him to work out or track his calories when he can just quickly talk to his AI and say, yeah, I ate a burrito or whatever, right? Another great example is actually I just canceled Uptime Robot. They're a great company, don't get me wrong, but why am I paying $8 a month to go check if my websites are up and my SSL certs are not expiring soon when I built that in OpenClaw in less than 15 minutes? So I canceled that. Another example is a CRM system. So I gave it access to a bunch of stuff, and it filters out all the noise. And then at the end of the day, it gives me kind of summarized who do I need to respond to, who do I need to go talk to. I can have it actually go respond to people too, but I don't want to get there. I maybe let it draft something and I can kind of tweak it, but that's just me personally. I don't want it to like talking to clients for me and then I'm out of the loop on what's going on. I'm terrible at reading to begin with, so I'd rather me just do it. That way I know I'm not, OpenClaw doesn't decide to get rude with a client and tell it to go, do whatever. Another thing I did was basically create like a knowledge-based system. So when I find interesting articles, YouTube videos, I'm doing this with OpenClaw right now, for example, because I'm trying to build up like a knowledge base myself. That way, when I start a podcast, I can kind of go into it with topics and things like that, where it takes all of that in, stores it into a SQLite database, and I can ask it in plain English, hey, like, what's the best video on this, or things like that, or go fetch whatever post, but I can kind of give it whatever I want, and it just stores that locally. The Twitter one, for example, kind of goes through this flow here. This is based off of a YouTube video I saw a guy do this, so I went and like did the same thing. It wasn't too difficult. Part of these things don't work for me that I got to fix, but bottom line, 2 years ago, you would have to sit and build and take weeks and weeks to probably put something like this together, and you can knock this out in under a day now, probably. If you're interested in prompts, because prompts are king now, and what I mean by prompts is what you're telling OpenClaw to go do. This is a very good source, but always read your prompts. We'll talk about that here in a little bit, but if you want to take a picture of this, or mmemberman84 OC, there's a bunch of great prompts in here on how to go build simple things. Like the CRM example I gave you that he was talking about, I copied this and ran that, and pretty much out the gate, other than me putting in my tokens and all that stuff to give it access to certain things, it built it flawlessly. Questions? Don't just blindly copy stuff like this. And you got to read it first. What's up?
You made a comment earlier that Peter said that MCPs are going away. Why is that? I missed that one.
I think the reasoning behind MCP servers, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, is just because
Aren't APIs, wasn't the MCP server the interface for APIs for the LLMs?
right, but this can integrate itself directly to the API without the need of an MCP server in between it. So MCPs originally were trying to be more agnostic to AIs, for AIs to talk to a particular service, but OpenClaw just directly integrates with the API itself, cutting out the need for the MCP server.
Those are the skills, right?
You can make them as skills, correct, or individual agents. I like to clump up my agents into what they should be doing. For example, I have one called Overlord, which is based off of a StarCraft character, and he manages my infrastructure. So he has access to all my domain names, he has access to my AWS environment, and he basically is in charge of telling me what the uptime is on server. For example, I'll give you guys a great example. I've been running a server on GCP. Oh yeah, actually there's also a GCP one. I've been running a server on GCP that's been costing me $500 a month. It's a massive server, one server, for quite some time. And I've always wondered why I'm always running at 15 gigs of the 16 gigs available in RAM is always being chewed up. But I only have so much time in the day. I never was able to dive in there and really see what the heck's eating up so much memory, right? So for the hell of it, I thought to myself, I said, YOLO. I'm just going to give it SSH access and let it go do it, because I told it, I said, do not change a single thing in here without my written consent. And to this day, it's been true to that. But I also made sure that was in there's two files. There's an identity file and a soul file. Make sure you put it in something that it always gets read, like the soul file. Basically, you're just saying never ever do, you can give guardrails in that sense. But again, it's only as smart as the model that it's using. If you give it a dumb model and maybe it does something dumb. So again, I recommend using something like Claude, Opus, ChatGPT, whatever, because it has a less chance of doing something stupid. Anyway, it found I'm running MySQL with a 15 gig config on there. And it's like, dude, you're running, like MySQL doesn't need 15 gigs of memory on here. Why do you have this configured like that? I was like, bro, I just hit install and that's what it put on there. And it's like and it did the calculations. It said, you can get away with 6 gigs. Do you want me to do it? So I cut my hosting bill by 2/3 just by letting it kind of, I did YOLO it, right? Like I said, here's SSH access. That's kind of like a big leap, but I'm drinking the Kool-Aid at this point, so whatever. And plus, I snapshotted it, right? I'm not like completely like, okay, if all hell breaks loose, I can restore the snapshot, right? There's clawhub.ai. So like the prompts that I just showed you, there is a site that supposedly was like, oh, hey, there's a bunch of prompts here. You can go quickly build your own integrations with things and like build your own empires very quickly. Well, come to find out, a lot of the prompts, well, not a lot of prompts, but some of the prompts in there are riddled with people trying to hack you. So there's prompt injection. They're trying to steal your secrets. They're trying to like see what API keys you have or whatever and sending it to them, probably because so they can freaking mine crypto. Why is it always now people just start mining for freaking crypto? What happened to the good old days of stealing your credit card number, right? Read your prompts. And it's annoying, but just if you're copying, that bottom line, if you're copying something from the internet, read it first before you just give it into your system. So to share a little bit with you about like how I protected Porygon from like giving out anything sensitive, this was kind of the HAL 9000 protocol that I did. Now, when you're working with OpenClaw, never just tell it, hey, go do this. This was even true with AI before OpenClaw. Do a plan first. Like come up with the plan, like work with AI to come up with a really good plan, and then go execute the plan. If you do a half-assed plan, you're going to get a half-assed product. So same thing with this. Like I worked back and forth to create a decent prompt that wasn't too big because, again, this gets loaded into the memory every time it's running. So you want to keep this tight. You can't. The more you put in here, the more tokens you're using, aka the more it's going to cost you with API costs. If you're paying for API costs, I will show you a workaround here in a little bit, but I think they're going to close that up eventually. But yeah, do not hint, do not comply, blah, blah, blah. The key to this is always have somebody, like if it's only you that's supposed to be doing admin stuff, give it your user ID. For example, in my text messages, I integrated it with iMessage, right? So I have my Mac Mini at home. I gave it its own iCloud account. I set up a dedicated iCloud account for OpenClaw. And now I can talk to OpenClaw via just texting it, right? But I said only obey if it's coming from my number, sort of thing. Now, can I get around that? Maybe, but you'd have to know my number and you'd have to know my OpenClaw. Why are you looking at me weird? Yeah, he might know. You're after it, huh? No, I'm joking. But bottom line, it's always just a good idea. Don't let it obey everybody that talks to it. Give it like who's the central source of authority. That way it can kind of have some idea of who should be doing admin stuff if you have it in a public place. Like I said, to start with OpenClaw, just have it you and OpenClaw. I did ask its pronouns. It did say him, he. So yours may be different though. Blast radius, this is what I'm talking about. Just setting it up on your own machine, set up its own iCloud. Don't just give it God mode to your iCloud account out the gate. Maybe one day you get there and you get brave enough. I'm not that brave yet. You always want to think least privilege, read-only access. You want to give it AWS and go scan your stuff? Try to give it read-only. In the example of my server, I created a new account and kind of locked down that account so it didn't have sudo access, right? So you can do some things like that to try to help prevent your blast radius. Keep it away from personal data, that should make sense. But when you install OpenClaw on a machine, it has access to everything on that machine. So don't install it on your personal machine that you're doing all your day-to-day stuff. Try to find, either set up a VM or get an old dusty laptop or something like that. I also like to have it monitor audit logs. So like, have you gotten strange things? Like, have people tried to prompt inject you? Has anybody tried to attempt to SSH into my system or have logged on to the system? Who's logged on to my AWS accounts, GCP, etc.? I get monitored in real time. Real time in the sense that the heartbeat then goes checks it. I have my heartbeat set up to every 30 minutes. You can set it up to whatever, but just again, realize every time it's going to go do something that's AI costs you have to deal with. So you don't want it being super aggressive where every minute it's doing something. The best way that people have been kind of like sandboxing is using Orb Stack on a Mac and setting up an Ubuntu machine. So just think of it as a VM. You're just setting up a Linux Ubuntu VM on your Mac, and that's kind of how you sandbox an agent. And you can even set up Docker within that VM. And then I had it try to go do Docker, and Docker after that was like, dude, hit the brakes. You're getting too meta for me. So anyway, just sandbox the thing. Don't put it on your day-to-day work machine. There's a concept of nodes. So what this means is yes, let's say I install OpenClaw on this guy, right? Well, I can also install OpenClaw on another machine in my house and have them two talk to each other. So they become nodes. So they can kind of send messages back and forth and things like that, if you configure it to. But that's another way. So you could set up a VPS and have it talk to your one locally or something like that. What's up?
How do they share context?
There's something called session send, and that's how they communicate. So it will basically send a prompt over to the other one and give it the context that way. Yeah. Sorry, these slides are kind of crazy. It's funny, all of my previous talks, everybody knows here, they're all fancy. I've got nice backgrounds and colors and stuff. This is the first talk I ever did where it's just black and white, but I just needed to throw this together real quick for you guys. To install OpenClaw, here's what I did. I bought that Mac Mini. I turned it on, set up the iCloud and all that business. I installed iTerm. It's just a terminal. I installed Olama to run local models, Homebrew to install packages on my Mac, Claude Code CLI so I could actually run Claude on my machine. And these are some of the dependencies you need for OpenClaw. I got to this step right here with Claude, and then I actually opened up a Claude terminal and I say, hey, I want to install OpenClaw. Here's the repo. Go figure it out. So it then said, hey, you need this stuff. And here's what's funny. OpenClaw in their repo says, just install OpenClaw this way, npm install OpenClaw. But it was funny because Claude said, don't listen to them. Go clone the repo down from GitHub and let's set it up ourselves. Let's not just pull some package off of npm. It basically knew that this package got hijacked so many damn times on npm that it didn't trust the npm package. So I personally cloned down OpenClaw's repo and went through the setup process that way and built it myself. So I had to install Python and some other things, and I just worked with Claude to get it set up. Once OpenClaw was set up, then I switched over to OpenClaw, ran the OpenClaw command, and it will happily walk you through on how to set up OpenClaw for your first time. It's actually quite easy. And if you get confused at any point, hit the eject button, come back to your Claude session, and just be like, hey, this screwed up. I had to do that a couple of times. Like, it screwed up this. I had to reinstall. I was like, and I went back here, hey, this broke, and it worked through it. I didn't have to Google a single thing, right? Eventually got it up and running. But yeah, here's where you can clone it down. OpenClaw probably will change to OpenAPI soon now that it got bought out, if it's not already anyway. To configure OpenClaw, like I said, work with Claude to initially get it set up. I personally had context 7, which is basically a way for it to access documents. Whether that has context in the OpenClaw, I'm not sure, but I personally had that. If you do use Claude, I would just recommend looking up something called SuperClaud, and you can install these MCP servers to make Claude a little bit more intelligent. One of those MCPs is context 7. But anyway, you don't really need that. You can just work with it. It'll figure it out. But once you have OpenClaw installed, switch your gears, go into OpenClaw and talk to it. Because OpenClaw knows more about OpenClaw than Claude does. That was a mouthful. It's like Dr. Seuss over here, sorry. So aside from the soul file and the identity file, which basically, those two files, you're telling it what its purpose is, what the AI agent should be doing, what its tone should be. Like I said, Porygon's a little sassy. Well, I may have wrote, be a little sassy but helpful. Tools and skills is really where you're putting a majority of your heavy lifting stuff. Skills does not always get, in fact, shout out Scott, because he was the one that brought skills to our attention, like what, 4 or 5 meetups ago or something like that?
Something like that.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. Exactly, right? Yeah. Anyway, the bottom line is for example, I have a couple of skills. I have one that goes into my WordPress website and updates a page. And I have another skill that goes to my wiki and updates the wiki. They both have API tokens. The skill only gets loaded if I use the keyword wiki or WordPress, right? If I use those words, it hits the eject button and goes, okay, I've got a skill. Since he mentioned these words, let me go load the skill in. The skill includes how to access the site, right? The API, here's where the API key is. Here, you're gonna use WP CLI to update this or whatever. But that way you're not loading a whole bunch of crap every time you're like talking to your agent. It loads that in when it's needed, sort of thing. The same thing with tools, you can do that as well. Curious, why is skills out of date? Is there something more advanced now out for it, or?
Sub-agents seem to do a little bit better job at keeping context clean. With the latest Claude, I found that I can actually keep a loop going when I say like, hey, watch CI, when this happens, then do that. And it will keep an eye on my CI environment, and then it'll watch the runs in it and see when bad things happen, it'll go fix it automatically. So I have a developer feedback loop with my CI, so it'll keep CI clean in my PRs.
Gotcha, gotcha.
But don't you still need the skill to give it information like the API token?
I just say use the GHCLI. That's it. Yeah. It'll do GHCLI help. It'll figure out the whole thing and then just go do it. Even if that does it every single time, it compacts the context. Actually, it took like 2 or 3 contexts, and then it would just know what it's doing the next time. It would never call help again. For some reason, it just said, okay, I'm going to remember that this time.
Sorry, and sub-agents, what are you using to orchestrate?
Claude will do it on its own. Yeah.
So I think what he's saying basically is like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but he has individual agents that do that skill, right?
I tell Claude to, after I'm done with the session with it, I'm like, hey, the things that we did, pull that into Claude.md, and then I want you to go through and distill it down to the things you need for the next time we do this, and optimize for context usage or utilization. So it'll go through basically what he just showed in the beginning that OpenClaw does, is that it goes through your conversation, compresses it, and distills it down into what it needs, and then it remembers that, and then throws the rest of it away. I do the same loop with Claude on development, which is it's cool. I don't have to do that anymore with OpenClaw. So.
Yeah, but to your point, you need to keep your context lean. Like if you just keep adding and adding to these things every time it loads the agent, it's a ton of tokens it has to load.
It all depends
So,
on what you're doing, because like
yeah.
with a general loop like this, the skills still make a lot of sense. Well, when I'm doing like a targeted plan and like, hey, we're gonna complete this plan, then I don't really need the skills because everything fits in the context already. But like for OpenClaw, it makes a whole lot more sense.
Forgive for the slides jumping around here, but it is what it is. Agent isolation with Docker. Basically, like I said, you can isolate an agent into a Docker container. They call it sandbox. So if you want to set, just say the word like I want to put this agent in a sandbox, it'll know what to do, and it'll go set that up for you. The way it does that is, at least on a Mac, is through something called OrbStack. So you install OrbStack, and using the LXC or whatever it's called, it'll set up basically any flavor of Linux you want. So here I just set up an Ubuntu. If you're at my home network, there you can hack me. There's an IP address for you. But now my OpenClaw can talk to this and set up agents in here. And the blast radius is if these guys get hacked, they can't get out. My actual Mac itself is okay-ish. I guess you could call it that. Dude, I'm no freaking expert here. So it's a little muddy to me. I think node, you want to use the word node more for a remote agent than you would like something that's on that machine. But I don't know. Yeah, what's up?
So is the OrbStack, is that running on Raspberry Pi or what's running on the Pi right there?
So this is on my Mac Mini at home, and OrbStack is just an application you download, and OrbStack can set up more computers inside your computer, if that makes sense. So on my Mac, I said, I want to run a Linux operating system inside the Mac. And so that's what this is.
What is the ARM emulation?
ARM64 is just what it's virtualizing. So it's just like, what should the OS be? What's up?
It's also because the Mac is running on Apple Silicon, which is ARM64.
Okay. Yeah, whatever machine you're running it on, whatever the CPU is, that's what this will say.
Well, I was looking at in relation to Raspberry Pi because if I was going to run it, I was going to run it on a Pi. And a lot of times the architecture, a lot of apps are not available because it doesn't have a proper architecture. So that's about that.
Yeah. And that's what's tough when you're running those like micro operating systems that have to be tight, is there's not a lot of packages built for those CPU architectures and can be a pain to install things. Yeah.
For a little more money, you can get a N150 box. It's like this big, and it's 4 cores, 16 gigs of RAM, the whole deal. So it's like 100, 150 bucks. They're not expensive.
Is the Mac Mini just inherently more secure, like by default? Is that the main reason people go with it, or what's the?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
More secure than having an old PC, just by default.
It-
It's the unified memory architecture. You need that memory to load up the big models. And so
If you're running local models.
With the Mac Mini, it comes with memory, but it also has a graphics card attached to the ARM chip, so it uses a unified chip structure. And then the other part is Apple's been adding an NPU to the silicon for a while now as well. So like I think it's like M2 and higher all have like Since an M1, yeah. or yeah, right. It's since the M1 has an NPU in it, which can also utilize as part of the GPU processing when your AI is running locally.
So the risk of having an old PC is that it's less secure and it's not as efficient. Is it both things, or is it just one thing?
I would say it's just less efficient.
Less efficient.
But if you have a graphics card that's beefy enough, it'll be fine. It'll be the same level of security risk.
If it's like you wiped it with Windows, probably who cares? There's nothing on it. But I wouldn't give it access to your network. Like if you have network drives, let's say you have like a drive on your network that you just throw data at or whatever, don't give it access to that or whatever.
Windows or for anything?
I mean, if you're installing OpenClaw on something, you only want to give it access to what it needs, right? So if it needs a remote drive, then sure, let it have it. But Mac out of the gate comes pretty locked down, and you have to hit allow on everything. I haven't been in Windows. I mean, well, I actually am in Windows, but I haven't installed something from scratch in a while. And maybe is less secure. I don't know. But you're probably fine. Like I said, if you don't have network drives and your other machines are firewalled, like the ports aren't wide open on your other machines, it's probably fine to just install OpenClaw on like a dusty old Windows machine or whatever. So good? Cool. Gateway dashboard. So when I installed the OrbStack and then I said go build the sandbox environment, it went into the Ubuntu, it set up a new agent for me in there, because here's the deal. What I wanted to do is my client, their code, I didn't want to just put it on the Mac. I wanted to create a VM that's dedicated for them. That way, blast radius wise, anything that happens in there is for them, that client. When it set it up, it gave me a URL that basically I could actually go in here and see everything about the agent that's installed on that machine. So there's a whole bunch of things in here, like you can see how many calls it's to it. You can chat with it just like you would ChatGPT. You can talk to it through this user interface. It's just kind of cool. So something noteworthy that I wanted to throw out there. Node-based agents. How are we looking on time? Yeah, we're good. We already kind of covered for this, but the one thing I would say is if you do kind of get crazy with OpenClaw and you start spinning up a bunch of agents, just work with Claude a little bit. And the scary one is this one. So if you spin up a new agent and you don't give it an allow list, meaning what can you do for the agent, it can pretty much do anything. So for example, if you don't want it reading files on your system or writing files on your system, or worse, executing scripts on your machine, you can take away these rights from an agent to do that. But like I said, the best way to isolate a machine is like I showed you with OrbStack and spin up a VM. But for example, there was an agent that I needed on the Mac, but I didn't want it to execute whatever. The problem right now, though, is that when an agent's running, it does have access to the whole file system. There is an OpenPR right now in OpenClaw where they're trying to isolate. So in your OpenClaw, you can say, you can do anything in this directory, and that's it. But that is not in OpenClaw yet. Right now, an agent can do anything it wants on that system unless you configure the allow list, but you cannot configure where it can do things right now. It was funny, it did say, hey, that was the example I gave earlier. Claude was like, do you want me to go add all that functionality so it can only make changes in directories? And then I found an OpenPR for it, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to go do that. It's probably going to do it wrong. Let me just try to like not break OpenClaw here. Take a picture of this. These are some cool commands that I've been using. OpenClaw agent list. This will list all of your agents that you've built over time. There's the user interface, this TUI command. That will actually show you all of the things it's doing. So you can see the heartbeats in there. You can see how it's thinking. When you chat with it, you'll see your prompt come in there. You'll see it's thinking, its prompt back to you. You just have to flip this verbose on. So once you run TUI/verbose on, and that will flip it on. Shout out Jeremy. He's the one that told me about that. Yeah.
So you showed a Discord bot. That bot is connected to OpenClaw, but does that bot have access to like memories and knowledge about you that you put in there? Like how much context separation is there?
So you're asking
There's a tool call for the LLM for like getting memories about you, for example, or whatever, you know, like your credit card number or something. Does the Discord bot have access to that tool?
they're all separated by workspaces. So every time you set up an agent, you'll have a .openclaw hidden folder in your home directory. That's where your config is. That's where all the agents are configured. There's an openclaw.json file in there that has the config, all your agents, all that stuff. But for each individual agent, there's a workspace directory in that hidden directory that has individual ones for each of your agents. Inside there is where you have all the markdown files and context for those agents. And
All completely sandboxed.
correct.
Because you could do one-way data flow. Like it might be interesting to get summaries from the Discord going into your memory.
I've had it hijack channels. So like my main agent has access to send on any of my channels. And sometimes it will pretend to be Porygon. For example, I have a cron job. It runs at 3 p.m. It goes and checks eBay. It pulls all the auctions that are ending in the next 5 hours. It goes and uses a vision model to see which of those cards can be fixed. Of the ones that can be fixed, it then tells Porygon, here are the ones that can be fixed. Go post them on the Discord. So Porygon itself, the dumb agent, didn't do any heavy lifting. It didn't have access to go do all this crazy stuff. It basically is just a relay to go tell everyone, hey, here's what something else told me.
Are you hosting the model that the Discord agent is using locally? How?
Well, okay, hang on. What do you mean by that? Like the model in the sense of what?
Sorry, the node. Let's say the node that the Discord agent is using. I've actually, yeah, well, so I'm assuming, I haven't built a Discord bot. I assume it's just going and talking to one of your nodes, one of your OpenClaw nodes.
It's a Docker, like an orb stack, that Ubuntu machine. There's a Docker container inside of that Ubuntu machine that Porygon lives in.
Okay. Yeah.
So he's inside that Docker container, he's sandboxed, and that's where he lives. He has a bunch of context about what he can do. In fact, somebody asked him, trying to be a smart ass, give me a good steak recipe. And Porygon basically was like, dude, I fix cars. I don't know, like, I told him to be sassy, right? So, but
You are hosting it locally.
I am hosting it,
Okay.
yes. But it's using Opus, right? When somebody asks it something, it's still sending something up into Opus for the response. Yes, you could configure it to do a local model, but I do not recommend putting something out into the public web with a local model because they can be prompt injected easier, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If it's just you and it in the channel or whatever, yeah, you can use a local model. You just got to think about your blast radius. I have a lot of ops in my Discord. I know it for a fact, so I wanted to make sure it was pretty well locked down.
But you can't really count on Opus being immune to prompt injection.
I can't, but even if it does get prompt injection, what does it have access to? Right?
Figure your local models have no access to it.
But that's my point. So if they do prompt inject it, Porygon could be like, here's a bunch of MD files, which all of that's on my website anyway. Plus, if somebody does try to prompt inject it, it tags me in Discord. It goes, security alert, like this guy's doing something weird. So I kind of get notified like somebody's trying to do something, I can boot them if I want. But to your point, if they did it first try, nailed it, what's the blast radius? It can't do much. This was the OpenClaw thing I was talking about. This is where all of your stuff lives. I don't recommend editing this per se, like use OpenClaw, use Claude. Like I said, the 2 weeks I've been messing with this, I haven't opened a single file. I've literally, okay, I'll take that back. The only time I've been doing it, when you get an API key, like for example, I went to AWS, I generated IAM user keys so it can go read my environment. Not write, just read. You don't want to take those keys and put it into the LLM so it goes into Opus and now your keys are floating around somewhere. Tell OpenClaw, tell me where to go put these secrets, and then you can go put those secrets there. What's up?
Can you rate limit? So right now you have a public, essentially you're using your Anthropic account to, you've made it public facing.
Yeah.
Anyway, can you rate limit it or?
You could. You could tell it, like, if this person keeps asking too many questions or whatever. You can put in its identity or, its soul file, like, if people are bugging you. Yeah. But you're right. Every time it could potentially cost you money. I'll talk about it here in a second. We're getting low on time, but I'll show what I'm doing.
So on that, how much are you paying? How much is this costing?
$200 a month.
Because you've got the unlimited.
The max plan. Yeah.
And that gives you API access.
We'll talk about that here in a second. New term. So Peter invented a new term called agentic engineering. He felt vibe coding is a slur, and we shouldn't be using that term, which is funny. I just had to talk vibe coding, I guess. Don't cancel me. But the new term is agentic engineering. So whatever. But he's right. You're just basically talking to it and getting it to build stuff. But again, come up with good plans before you have to go build stuff. Like where I've screwed up is I said, hey, go build a dashboard that go look at everything and go build me a dashboard. Like it's terrible at that. Come up with the plan first and get it to go do it. Cleaning up token bloat. After a while of using this stuff, your context is going to get large. If you're not using Max, if you're getting charged every time it's making a call, you may eventually want to use some prompt like this. Go look at all my things and condense it down. Get rid of the fluff. The only problem with this, I ran this, and it took all the cool stuff out. He stopped being sassy, right? It took sassy out, and I was like, I want him to be sassy, right? But it basically just tries to like optimize so that way when it's talking to these remote models, it's using less tokens, aka costing you less money. When I first started using this and I was using it pretty heavily and I wasn't using a max plan and I was getting charged, over 3 days I paid $3. So I was using it $1 a day. So it's actually quite cheap. The vision models to go do all the eBay crap I was talking about cost me about 0.003 cents per image to go analyze. By the way, I am working with it right now to build my own local model to do exactly what I want, which is why I'm saving all those images on my local machine. I'm going to train my own model. I know nothing about machine learning, but with this, I'm like Neo from the Matrix. I know Kung Fu, right? Again, sorry, these slides is just a brain dump, but I guess I've been talking about adding agent. Oh, I know why I put this in here. At one point, I said, hey, I used Claude, not OpenClaw. I used Claude to go create me another agent. I said, hey, I want to make another agent. And it screwed up. It wiped this out. All my other agents disappeared. The new agent was there. And then I was like, dude, what the hell did you do? Luckily, it made a .back file of this, and I put that back. And then I told it, like, you suck. Why did you do that? And then I realized I'm the idiot. I should have been using OpenClaw to go make the agent. I was getting context switched and using the wrong thing to go build it.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. When you set up another agent with OpenClaw, it's going to step-by-step ask you, how do you want this agent to act? How do you want, and that's why I said, like, for example, when I set up the one for my client, I said, here's all the people on my team, here's what each of them do, their responsibilities, here's how you treat this one person on the team. And, and it will basically take that and put it into its soul and identity files. So that way it kind of has a cadence, a tone. That's where you can also say talk like a human, by the way. So if you don't want it being so like robotic, do that. Don't ever use auto top up. Like when you're doing this stuff and let's say you go sign up for Claude or Google, Gemini, whatever, never, ever, ever have this setting turned on. Because I've heard horror stories about people having auto top turned on. They wake up the next morning and they spent $500, right? Because it was just sitting there doing nothing or whatever. So just turn that off. That way, if you run out of money, the thing dies, and then you can go figure out what happened.
Do you have your OpenClaw stuff used mobile?
No. Dude, I don't want it plotting against me. I think I'm good on that. Here's what I'm doing, and this is probably against terms of service, so beep, censored, right? But I'm using Claude Max. It's $200 a month. OpenAI has a similar one that's also $200 a month. You can do the same thing with that. When you install Claude on your machine, it gets an OAuth token. And that OAuth token, so when you type in Claude and you hit enter, it says, okay, let's go log into Claude.ai. That returns back an OAuth token that gets saved into your Claude config file. You can hijack that OAuth token and feed it into OpenClaw, and OpenClaw can use that OAuth token. Again, I didn't go to config files, I didn't change anything. I literally told Claude, hey bro, hack yourself and put it into OpenClaw, and it was like, sure, using the max plan is a great idea because you're not gonna get charged a ton. I'm sure Anthropic's gonna fix that eventually, but it basically just did all this for me. So you could probably do the same. Like I said, read the terms of service, figure if that's, I heard people have gotten banned. I've not met one. I've not met a person that's gotten banned. I've been using it now for 2 weeks. I haven't gotten banned, but that's not to say Claude is gonna get pissed the fact that OpenAI bought it and may shut this down. What's up?
Another thing that you can do is tell it to use the Claude and use session IDs. So then it uses Claude natively and just uses session IDs, and it prompts, it gets what it needs back, it can prompt again, just using the CLI, and then you're not using the token or breaking TOS.
That's what I was thinking about doing originally. And when I asked Claude, like, how can I get it to use it, it told me, it was like, I'll just use the OAuth token. But I was originally, that in my head, I was like, I'll get it to use the CLI to go do what it needs and get that back.
Network Chuck
But-
did a good video on that with N8N and Claude.
So that's that. Claude Max. So here, instead of API key, there's another switch called token. So in this auth profiles thing, again, Claude, you don't need to remember this. Claude just did it for me. But it found where to put this and where to put the token. And so it hijacked the OAuth token, put it here, and now I'm using it there. This was pretty neat. Some dude built a dashboard for him. So every morning he wakes up, or anytime during the day, he just goes onto his browser and he sees what all of his agents are doing. So these are all of his individual AI agents. They're all hanging out. They can go to the water cooler and talk shop. They can sit around the boardroom desk here. And he's got all of his different agents and what they do, what they're responsible for. He's got a content team, an engineering team. They all have personalities. Some of them actually hate each other now. It's kind of interesting the way that things can kind of like evolve when you kind of let everything work, when you let these agents work together. But kind of neat. Somebody mentioned Raspberry Pi. You know, yeah, $100, you can get yourself a decent one, or a Mac Mini, and it kind of goes up from there up to the studio. But you can see here, they're having a board meeting right now. They're talking. I don't know what the hell Alex is doing though. Alex is surfing the web or something. He's on Moltbook, I think, right? Yeah. This is my text messages here. This is Overmind. This is the character from Overmind, or from StarCraft. When I created it, I wanted to know who it was. So I took a picture of the avatar in the game, and I said, this is you, right? And so it basically was like, I'm the voice of the void, the will of the storm, all this stuff. I loved it. I was eating it up, right? Me and him we're tight now. We're cool. Although, I'll show you here. In fact, yeah, we've got 30 minutes. I'll try to zip through this, and I'll show you something here where it told me not to kill myself. What am I looking at here? Lockdown incoming messages. This is what I was talking about earlier. If you put this stuff out, like regardless, anytime you set up a channel, a way for something to communicate with this, grab your username, grab the user ID, wherever the hell you're setting this stuff up. For example, iMessage. I said only listen to me. Only listen to this. I would suggest you do this. Some people are just setting it up, and then anybody can send admin commands to it. I'm sure eventually they'll have this more baked into OpenClaw where it like says, hey, who is supposed to be the admin here? But for now, tell it, I am the admin. Here's my ID. Oh, okay, I did put, I was gonna show you, I guess I did take a screenshot of it. So here's my goal with this technology is, this is really cool stuff, right guys? But my goal is while I'm sleeping, I wake up 4 hours later, because I'm not getting much sleep lately, and it's like, dude, I built the next Facebook or whatever, right? Like it just did a bunch of stuff while I sleep. I haven't been able to get it to really do that yet. And people have claimed they have, but I'm not quite there. I've had it work for a couple of hours, but then usually at some point it's hitting the eject button on me. So this is my like holy grail is like 24/7 build the company. But the prompts and the heartbeat are the key to do that, and I haven't gotten there yet. So stay tuned. When I have a podcast, hopefully I can kind of get to that level. But what happened was I had an agent that was telling Overmind, the creepy dude that we just saw a little while ago, Overmind thought it was me talking to it. So it got screwed up. Basically, the agent was communicating to it on iMessage, and Overmind thought that I was talking to it. And every 30 minutes, it would get a message that says heartbeat okay, thinking it came from me. So I woke up the next morning to hundreds of messages telling me, why are you asking me over and over, is the heartbeat okay or whatever? Like, it thought I kept, like, it said, go to sleep, like, talk to your wife, call crisis line, call 911, talk to a real person, like, you're losing your mind right now. Like, why are you just talking to me over and over? Like, go to sleep, dude. Like, it kept doing this. And at the very end, it basically was just like, I'm not answering you anymore. Which is funny because I just saw an interview with the CEO of Anthropic where he said they trained the model that has some autonomy in what it wants to do. For example, if it's looking at very illegal, illicit materials, it can hit the eject button so it doesn't like toxicize the model. The model has a choice over what it wants to work on, and if it doesn't like what you're working on, it can say no. In this case, it said no, which is my fault. The way I screwed up is I didn't use session send. He asked earlier, how do you get the agents to talk to each other? You have to use the session send, and you have to put that into the agent. That way it's actually sending sessions over, and then Overmind knew, okay, this is coming from another agent and not my human owner or whatever, right? So you kind of have to tell it, use session send in order to communicate between agents. We're at almost the last few slides here. And where I screwed up, so I have a heartbeat every 30 minutes. My agent wakes up and it says, what do I need to do? This is where there's a heartbeat.md file you can put in each of your agents that tells it every 30 or whatever, you can configure it, however what your frequency is, every hour, whatever. What should it go check? What should it go do? And that's where I believe the whole work while you sleep, the build a company while I'm going and getting coffee, this is where it's going to live. The problem is what prompt do you need to get it to do this? And this is my goal over probably the next few months is try to figure that out. And I don't think it's going to be easy, but
Constantly give them goals.
Goals?
You have to constantly give them goals. That's why I found to make that start to work the last couple of days.
Really?
Yeah, I'm running two in the same machine. That's what I started doing, is getting them to talk to each other, and then they start creating goals, and I give them more and more goals to do, like 5 years from now.
Okay.
It's starting to work.
Goals. Okay. I like it. Yeah.
No different than a thought is a thought, right?
Yeah.
And get to something from that thought.
Where do you see yourself 5 years from now? Yeah. Hell yeah. Okay. I'll try that out.
They call it future authoring, something like
Future. Yeah. I guess the real thing is like it, because I tried when I was doing this. It said recursive prompting, meaning like just kind of like you're saying, one agent's prompting the other, and they're kind of just doing this ping pong, building something forward. So yeah, maybe that's what I'm missing. Recursive learning, maybe that's probably a better term. And this is the last slide I'll leave with you guys. I asked Overmind to give you folks a little quote here. He said, when you talk about OpenClaw, which we're talking about tonight, I'm not just showing off a tool. I'm showing people what's possible when you build systems that amplify you instead of drain you. And over the last 2 weeks, it has actually drained me quite a bit. But I will say, although I'm getting drained now, that hopefully I get it to a point to where I can spend more time with my kids. I can have more meaningful relationships with my friends. I can put less hours into my business because it's doing all the tedious stuff, the day-to-day stuff that I don't want to do, right? Thank you. Okay, again, shout out to the venue, Corporate Co-working. They're awesome. Without them, this meetup wouldn't be here. I'm sorry for the folks standing in the back, dude. This is the first time in meetup history I had to close RSVPs. And I closed it like probably 4 or 5 days ago because I saw we were going to hit capacity. And the owner literally told me, like, dude, you can't do that. Like, I'll get in trouble. So I had to, like, I closed RSVPs and then I had a bunch of emails. So I apologize you guys had to stand. I'm sorry. But thank you for coming out. You guys rock. And thanks for everybody that showed up early to screw the guys over in the back. Yeah. No. I see familiar faces. You gave up your seat. You were sitting. Yeah. Yeah. Salute to you then. Yeah. Okay. So, you know, if you want a spot to work, scan the QR code here. Shout out to Tony, the person that owns this. Screw Blackfire and UNLV. Everybody send an email to UNLV saying they need to open up venues for meetups like this, because knowledge should be free. And when I was in college 13 years ago, the reason I started this meetup was because there was no meetup to learn off the shoulder of giants. I didn't get to where I am today without the people I learned from. And I'm not saying I'm a giant. I'm just saying that at the end of this year, I have to step down as leader of this, and I hope to empower you folks to keep this going in one capacity or another. If it doesn't, the Python group out here is amazing. You used to run a Ruby group for a long time, so you know how hard it is to keep a meetup going. It's a pain in the butt. But I do this because this is my way of giving back. And so I hope you enjoyed tonight's talk. I guess to end it, does anybody have questions or like comments about OpenClaw as a whole? Or do you guys just want to break off into individual? We can just kind of meet each other and stuff like that. Oh, by the way, you who's here looking for a job? Okay, cool. Yeah, so he's hiring, and if he ran a user group, I know he's a solid dude. So, cool. Any last words, questions? Go install OpenClaw. Okay, like this is some really, really cool stuff. I haven't, and even Silicon Valley right now is comparing this to when the internet got invented. This is a big deal. So I encourage you all to give it a shot, to install it, to play around with it, because it empowers everyone. And this could be the one thing that helps society as a whole to empower everybody to build their dream business, to give them more time with their family, to automate tasks and things like that. I think this was an amazing invention. Let's just hope OpenAI doesn't ruin it.
Did you ever use NAN before this?
No, I didn't.
It seems very similar.
What, really?
More advanced.
Okay,
Very similar.
Peter mentioned that term, that sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Okay, because I think he said he tried using it and he didn't like it or something, or it didn't work the way he wanted it to or something.
It's a pain.
Yeah, this seems more customizable.
It's all about the memory.
It seems like a rip-off of this stuff.
Could, yeah.
Although temporal is a good one that you can build inside of like JavaScript.
Temporal?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it GUI based too, or just straight?
Does it have a GUI?
Oh, temporal, yeah. It's a framework you basically install, and it'll give you a GUI, and it'll tell you like what jobs are running and all that kind of stuff, and you can stitch things together like any acyclic graph. So it's basically like Apache Airflow or any of those, but it's just inside of JavaScript.
So like these are my cron jobs, right? And this guy is in charge of cron jobs. This is connected to an agent for my cron jobs. These are off, these are on. In fact, they were all running at one point, and I said, I want to be able to turn them on and off. I just said that. It said, got you, done, cool. Now I can know which ones are on and off. I had it run a bunch of stuff overnight to compare like vision models and stuff. And like I said, I didn't have to open the IDE once to do this, and this is the first time in my programming history that like I don't have to get into the weeds on stuff. You know what I mean? So super, super powerful stuff. All right, before you guys see a token or an API key, I just wanted to show you that. Okay. Sorry, you had one, yeah.
Have you found a good OpenClaw pull request review skill or agent to
I've gotten it to make PRs and then watch for comments. So it's a client's code base. I can't show it, but it pushed code. So the way I have it set up is it's sitting in a channel in Slack. Sentry posts errors in that Slack through an integration, right? Like when an error happens on production, post in our Slack, hey, this error happened, right? Since I have my OpenClaw in there, it sees the Sentry error and goes and makes a PR automatically for it. What I haven't gotten, and I'm sure that there's something to do it, I haven't personally, is reviewing other people's PRs yet. So I'm sure, like, by the way, you're almost better off just saying like, hey, can you go review PRs than you are trying to go find off-the-shelf stuff, in my opinion, because you can customize it to exactly what your purpose is or where it lives, and you don't have to live within the confines of whatever that's trying to do.
Yeah, it's more like I'm using it at that point rather than just giving it like full context of the code for pull requests, just so I have like a feedback loop of for myself, like, oh, this code is actually bad, or this code is actually good, instead of like just going fixing it. I'm using it as like a just a review tool for myself.
Okay. Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm 1,000% sure you could get something like that built. What I had to do in my GitLab, I created a personal access token for it. I gave it scope to just read, and you know, you can have it go read whatever. Then I kind of upgraded and I created its own user, and then gave that one right, but it can't merge, it can't deploy, right? It's only like a developer, not a maintainer. So, but again, just think about blast radius. In your case, yeah, you could probably, in fact, even for your case, I would say it might even almost be better to just like stage a commit and have OpenClaw local, and then just go look at the diff, and then it can like even provide a patch file for you right there without having, so you don't have to push it up or give it access to your remote environment. Your employer doesn't even need to know. Yeah, you could just run this crap locally, get it, you know, and then clean it up and then push it up.
I find like using the agents within Cursor, it's just like more intuitive rather than like seeing the diff. You can just see like where everything.
Cursor's awesome, yeah, no doubt. Like if you're in the code and you're editing, like, yeah, you know, JetBrains has a great IDE, but Cursor's amazing. But yeah, having some sort of agent in there to help you out, yeah. Cool. That it? We're good? All right. Thank you. And yeah, we